Hello everyone, so in today's episode I will be showing you guys how to start a podcast from absolute scratch and how to actually grow and make your podcast successful. So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Jasmine. I am a certified life coach and mentor, and I am also the podcast host for Just Glow With It, which by the way just got nominated for Best Podcast of the Year in 2020. So I think I know a thing or two about how to grow a successful podcast. So this video is going to be split up into two parts. The first being how to actually start your podcast from scratch. So I'll be covering software, equipment, programs, editing, creating your artwork, and actually getting your podcast up and running. And then the second part is all about how to grow and make your podcast successful. So I'll be sharing the tips and things that I've learned along the way that have helped my podcast to grow. And I will also be leaving timestamps in the description below. So if you want to jump around, you can do that. So let's just go ahead and get into this video. Ask yourself why you want to start it in the first place. Is it just for fun? Is it a therapeutic outlet for you? Is it because you want to, progress your personal development growth? Is it that you want to share your advice, your opinions to the world? Or do you have a business and you're wanting to reach a bigger audience and just be on another platform? It's what's going to motivate you to keep going, to not give up on yourself. So definitely know your why. And the first thing that I want to say is that it is not necessary to buy expensive equipment at all, especially when you're just starting out your podcast and if you're not really sure if it's something that you're going to take seriously or if it's just going to be like a fun project. I have some free options for you if you're starting out, and I'll also be sharing the equipment that I personally use for my podcast. For free options, the first thing that you can use is your phone to record. So it's not the best quality, of course, but it is doable to just use your phone to actually record your content. If you are interested in purchasing a microphone for podcasting, the microphone that I use this is the microphone that I use for recording my podcast. It is the Samsung Go mic. It has the USB cord, and then it obviously connects to the computer. So I got this off Amazon, and this mic is roughly around $50 to $80, but I did not start off with this microphone. I think I started off using my phone or my laptop microphone, and once I knew I was going to take podcasting seriously, that is when I decided to invest in a microphone. I really, really like this microphone. There's obviously even better quality microphones out there, but I think this is perfect if you're just starting out, and it's done the job for me. Now, the next equipment that you will need is headphones. So you can use any type of headphones that you have. You don't need anything fancy. However, the headphones that I use these headphones are the Sennheiser HD 380 Pro. These headphones are pretty pricey. They run about $150 to $200 depending. However, I did not purchase these headphones. I got these as a hand-me-down for my boyfriend. Before I got these headphones, I was just using the regular headphones, and that worked totally fine. So the program that I use to actually record my episodes is GarageBand. Obviously, GarageBand is free if you have a Mac. However, if you do not have a Mac, I believe the equivalent for Windows is Audacity. I'm not familiar with Audacity. I've never used it, so I can't say much about it. But for GarageBand, it works perfectly fine. If you don't have GarageBand or you don't have Audacity, you can also use Anchor to record your podcast. And I will actually be showing you a screen recording of how to use Anchor. So when I was first creating my podcast, this was the step that was the most confusing for me because I did not understand the steps that were necessary. So I'm actually going to be showing you guys a screen recording of how to choose your platform and how to get your podcast set up. But before I show you the screen recording of how to set up your podcast, I want to talk about different platforms that I've used throughout my podcasting journey. So I've only ever used 3 different platforms. I've used SoundCloud, Buzzsprout, and Anchor. And Anchor is the platform that I'm currently using. I wasn't a fan of SoundCloud simply because I didn't feel like it was user-friendly and it didn't have many options when it came to podcasting. I just didn't really like that platform, and I felt like it was more difficult for people to find my podcast through SoundCloud, so I don't recommend SoundCloud. And then the second platform that I've used was Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout, I'm not that big of a fan of either, simply because of their setup. They have 3 different memberships. So the first membership is absolutely free. The second one is you pay like $7 to $10 a month, and it has some limitations. And then the third is like the unlimited option. And when I first got Buzzsprout, I did the free option. And the free option, it wasn't that great because you were limited with how many minutes you could record a month. And what I also didn't like about Buzzsprout for the free option is that your episodes would delete after a certain amount of time. So, for example, if I recorded an episode today and I uploaded it today, in 30 days it would delete. And if you're trying to make it successful, that is not going to help you. And I didn't like the idea of having to pay for my platform, especially because at the time I was not making money off my podcast. So it just didn't make sense for me. And now we can move on to the third platform, which I think is the best podcast hosting platform in my opinion. And the reason why I believe so is because it's very user friendly. It's free. You can do so much on it. As I mentioned before, you can record directly on Anchor. You can edit on there, you can add music, and you can actually host your podcast on there. And a really cool thing about Anchor, which by the way, this video is not sponsored by Anchor at all. I just thoroughly enjoy Anchor. But another plus from Anchor is you can actually make money from Anchor. So there's options where you can put ads in your podcast, and every time someone listens to your podcast, you get money from it. So that's a really great incentive as well. So you can create your artwork through Canva. I really recommend that. It's free. That's what I did when I was first starting out. And then once my podcast kind of grew and I wanted to like level up the look and feel of my podcast, I then invested in a graphic designer to design my podcast cover art. And I feel like your podcast cover art is very, very important because it's the first thing that people see, and you want a very captivating cover art. So what I recommend is using your face or visuals is really key, and also making sure that the title is actually legible. If people don't know what your podcast is about based on the cover art, or if they can't read it, most likely they're just gonna skim through it and not even give your podcast a chance. So do something that's captivating, that is true to you, and that is very easily legible and easy to understand what your podcast is about. So now I'll just show you how to actually create your podcast on Anchor. Okay, so now I'm going to show you guys how to actually create your podcast and get it set up on Anchor. So I just went on to anchor.fm/signup, and this is where you create your account. However, if you already have a podcast and you want to switch to Anchor, there's an option right below where you can also import an existing podcast. So if you want to do that, you can, but I am just starting from the beginning. Okay, so once you sign up, it's going to ask you to verify your email address, so I'm just going to do that now. Okay, so you're going to continue to dashboard, and this is what you will find. So it says, welcome to Anchor. Here's what happens next. So the first thing you have to do is make your first episode. It says if you're not totally ready to commit, try making a short trailer to get your podcast out there. Okay, so we're just going to do that. And this is what I was talking about when I said that you can record directly on Anchor. So I'm just going to hit record. And I'm just going to say something random. Hello, welcome to my new podcast. So excited to have you here. And then it's just going to upload, process. So now it's been uploaded, saved, processed, and now we can add background music if you'd like. I haven't actually added music from Spotify, but it's possible. And then you have your record option where you can directly record. You have your library where it's like all of the recordings of previous recordings you've done, music, messages, which I have never used, and transitions. So those are just, transitions that you can add to your episode. So I'm going to go to library. I'm going to add this recording to my episode. And this is what I was talking about when I said that you can get paid for every episode. Just click activate sponsorship. And I'll show you this this part later, but you can add a sponsored segment for every episode. So I'm gonna save the episode, and then this is where you write your episode title and the description. And then below you can choose to publish, when to publish it. And then you can choose to have a season number episode, what type it is, if it's clean or explicit, and then upload new episode art, which I will show you how to do in a moment. So I'm just gonna say it's the trailer episode. Thank you for tuning in. And then you can also add links in your description and show notes. So I am gonna hit save as draft. And then down here is where it'll show the analytics and stuff like that, but I obviously don't have any right now. So I'm gonna go back to dashboard. It's gonna prompt you to finish your episode. So let's see, finish episode. Now we're gonna move on to setting up your podcast. So we have to choose a name and cover art for your podcast. So we're gonna do that. We'll say it's Just Glow With It. We'll say it's Jane Doe Speaks. I don't know. Podcast on all of the things. Okay. And then you will choose your podcast category. And I believe you can change this later. So if you end up starting in one category and then you change it, you can always do that. I'm just going to say that it's in entrepreneurship. And the language is, and then continue. And then it says choose your cover art. So you can search for a photo, you can upload an image, or you can have them choose one for you. For now, I'm going to click choose one for me, but I'm going to show you guys how to create your own cover art. So I'm just going to say that's what it is, okay? And then you can choose, oh, okay, so I did not know this actually. So I guess you can actually create your own cover art on Anchor, but I use Canva. So just update it. And now we are ready to distribute your podcast. So this includes Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and a bunch of other platforms. You can choose to distribute it yourself. However, I don't know why you would do that. It's so much easier to have Anchor distribute your podcast for you. So just click yes. Your podcast is set up. We're distributing your podcast. You've enabled monetization, and now it's just about getting listeners. And that's really all it is. My podcast is set up, but when you go under episodes, it'll just list all the episodes that you have. And when you go under money, this is where you do your sponsorship. So this normally is where it would have like how much money you've made. And these are the active sponsorships right now. Because I just started, I only have Anchor as a sponsorship, and you just record a little segment talking about Anchor and you include it in your episodes, and then you get money every time somebody listens. If you are using Canva, it's important to make sure that you have the correct dimensions. So I'm going to type in podcast cover art and just click this one. And I believe, what are these dimensions? I'm not sure what the dimensions are, but just type, if you're using Canva, just type in podcast cover art and it should be the correct dimensions. And just make sure that whatever design you do, as I said, make sure it's legible, make sure it's clear what your podcast is about, and download it as a PNG. Okay. And then we're going to go back to Anchor, and we're under settings. We're going to update our cover art. Upload an image. And you can choose to zoom in or zoom out, but I think that's fine. And then you can choose to add text over it, but since there's already text, I'm not going to apply text. And you can choose to show Anchor logo on your cover art. I'm not going to. And then I'm just going to update cover art. And then that's pretty much it. Your podcast should be set up. And again, this is why I love Anchor, because it makes the distribution part super easy and you literally don't have to do anything. So if you want to double check the steps to make sure you got them all, you just need to make your first episode. It says your podcast is set up. They're distributing your podcast for you and monetization is enabled, and then you just record your episodes. And so the next thing is to just begin recording and posting your podcast. And that is pretty much it. So again, just to reiterate, the 5 steps when first creating your podcast is to first know your why, very important. Get the proper equipment and software necessary. Choose your podcast hosting platform. Create a cover art for your podcast, and then just begin recording and posting. Okay, so now I want to move on to tips for how to actually grow your podcast, make it successful, and all of that good stuff. So I want to start off by saying the 3 main elements that I feel are necessary to have a successful podcast is to be consistent, to be authentic in your voice and in what you're saying, and to be relatable. I feel like if you have these 3 elements, then your success is inevitable, not even just with podcasting, but with most things in life. So promote your podcast on your social media. I promote every episode on my Instagram stories, and I promote on my Twitter. When you're first starting out, ask your friends to promote your podcast for you, and it's just a great way to get people to know about your podcast. And the thing is, if you don't promote yourself, how are people going to find you? And another great tip is plug in your podcasts when it's convenient. So for example, the other day I was scrolling on social media and somebody that I follow asked for podcast suggestions. That was a great opportunity that I took to plug in my podcast. And now I'm not saying to be annoying and plug in your podcast under every comment, every Instagram post, because that's spamming and it gives off a bad vibe, for lack of a better word. But when you find it convenient, definitely plug yourself in. Promote, promote, promote. So ratings on iTunes is what's going to get your podcast discovered by other people, and the more ratings you have, the more people are going to discover your podcast. People would DM me about my podcast, or they would just congratulate me or say that they enjoy my podcast. I would obviously thank them, and I would ask them to leave an honest iTunes review if they felt like it. Most of the time, people are willing to leave a review. It takes like 2 seconds, and those reviews really, really do help a lot. So the way that I like to plan out my content for my podcast is the day before or the day that I'm going to record my podcast, I will create an outline of topics that I want to talk about for this week's episode. I will jot down main points and ideas that I want to share. And the reason that I do this is so that my podcast kind of flows and I'm less likely to ramble and be all over the place. So you want to think of Spotify and Apple Podcasts and iTunes as a Google search engine. So if your podcast titles are either too specific or too vague, it makes your podcast difficult to get discovered. So a great example of a bad podcast title and a good podcast title is an episode I did with a past client of mine where we talked about her manifesting her dream career, her personal development growth, up-leveling her mindset, and a lot of girl talk topics. I could have titled this episode Girl Talk 101 or Career Talk or something like that. Instead, I chose to include all of the main topics that I talked about in this episode in the title. So what I ended up calling this episode is Modern Girls Talk on Investing in Yourself, Manifesting Your Dream Career, and Having a High Vibe Mindset. It covers all of the main points that I talked about, and it's also very enticing. And also, whether someone searches investing in yourself, dream career, manifesting your career, mindset, whatever someone searches, whether it's any of those 3 things or one of those 3 things, my episode is going to come up. Also with keywords, also be sure to include keywords in your description in the show notes of your podcast, so like where the description goes, you want to include what the episode is about, get very detailed, and also use in keywords, because the words that you put in the show notes are also searchable and discoverable. So for me, for example, my whole purpose and niche with my podcast is to inspire women to glow and to create their dream lives by elevating their self-worth and transforming their mindset. So it's a lot about personal development. It's a lot about becoming your best self, mindset, and just living your best life pretty much. So the things that are within my niche include mindset. It includes your habits, your daily routines. It includes, your morning routine, manifestation, because I'm really big on manifestation. It includes money talk, money mindset talk. It includes friendships, career, self-worth, self-love, self-care, health, wealth. All of that falls under the same umbrella. And when you're first starting out, you may not know what your niche is exactly, and that's totally okay. I definitely was all over the place when I first started my podcast. You find what works for you, you find what you're actually passionate about talking about, which is very key, is find something that you're actually passionate about and that you care about. So my sixth tip is to interview guests on your podcast, especially if they are educated in a certain field that you may not be well educated in. Not only does this help educate your audience, but it also helps expand your audience and your platform to your guest audience. And it's very important that whoever you interview is still related to your niche, because chances are if you interview someone on your podcast that is related to your niche, their audience is going to like your content and vice versa. So a great example of this is when I interviewed a wellness and nutrition coach on my podcast. Her name is Arielle Simone, and she teaches people how to eat for energy. She really transforms your whole idea around what it means to eat healthy and be healthy and change your lifestyle. So she provides amazing practical tips on Instagram and Twitter. Definitely check her out and check out the episode that I have with her. They will all be linked in the description, right? Being healthy and wellness and nutrition and all of that falls under the umbrella of personal development and living your best life. However, it's not a field that I am well educated in. It really benefited my audience and myself to have someone who is well educated in something like that. And it helped my audience find her and her audience find me. Out of all the platforms that I have and that I use, my podcast is definitely the platform where I am the most vulnerable and open and authentic. And I truly feel because of that, that is why my podcast is as successful as it is, because people feel like they can relate to me, they feel connected to me, they feel like they know me without really knowing me. And I feel, especially now more than ever, people are searching for connection and community. You get to decide what you want to share. So even for me, although I'm very open about my personal experiences, what I'm currently going through, lessons that I've learned, I still don't share everything. I don't share every single problem. I don't share super personal, like family matters or relationship matters. I choose to share what I'm comfortable sharing, and that is enough for people. Obviously, consistency is key with anything, and when I say be consistent, I mean be consistent with posting regularly and often, and be consistent with what you are posting. So this goes back to my other tip of having different topics related to your niche. This is really important because although it's important to have an array of different topics, if you have too broad of topics in your podcast, it may not stick with people. I listen to a business podcast to get business information, business tips, and all of that. So I don't want to hear about that person's personal life if this is a business podcast. A podcast that's more fun, chill, like girl talk style episodes, I go to that podcast for that specific reason. So be sure to be consistent with what type of content you're posting. And my next tip is kind of piggybacking on what I just said. And tip number 9 is to use your own voice and show your own personality, because at the end of the day, people are tuning in for you. They either like what you say, they like your personality, they like your perspective on things, they like your tone. And the thing is, when you don't know what your voice is, when you don't know what your tone is very tempting to try and emulate somebody else's personality or tone or voice or whatever the case is. Whether it's subconsciously or consciously, people can sense when you're not being true and authentic to yourself and when you're trying to be like somebody else. So always speak in your voice, speak in your tone. And like I was saying, people tune into certain podcasts for certain things. So those are my 9 tips for how to grow a successful podcast. I hope that you found them helpful and useful, and I hope that you apply them as you create your own podcast, and may it help you grow your podcast the way that it has helped me. You know, success will come to you when you're not so focused on the numbers and you're not so focused on why isn't anyone listening to my podcast? You know, why isn't it growing? Why isn't no one watching? Why is this like not growing? Because the more that you focus on people not listening to your podcast not growing, that is what you will continue to attract. So my biggest takeaway that I would love for you guys to take from this video is to just have fun with your podcast. Don't be so worried about the numbers. Don't be so worried about growing, and just stay consistent. Be authentic, be relatable. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would appreciate if you could like, subscribe, share this video with whoever you think may need it. And as always, until next time, remember to just go with it.